Come on, living stone. We're gonna go on and on and on. Together we can make it. We're gonna go on and on and on. Come on, living stone.
Knocks it through. Mullen bursting into the box. Josh Mullen.
Together we can make it.
Mullen's ball across. It's turned in. It's Pittman who's got it. Livingston leads.
Can they get the ball back in? O'Brien. Lead! And Livingston have the lead! Man, can score.
If we march to
The full-time whistle blows and David Hayes celebrates. And the Livingston fans join in exultation.
come on, living
Livingston have the lead against Rangers, and they are certainly rising to a few occasions on their return to the top flight in Scotland.
Hello and welcome back to Talk Livi, the podcast dedicated to everything Livingston Football Club and Scottish football. My name is Angus and today I'm joined by Euan. Euan, how are you doing, mate?
I'm good, mate. I'm good. Obviously a bit disappointed with the result on Saturday. I think my feelings probably reflect the Gaffer's. If anyone's heard his post-match, bit frustrated that we didn't manage to get over the line and get a crucial 3 points in our bid to try and get top six. But other than that, I had a weekend off coaching, so I didn't have to go out in the elements and get battered by the wind and rain for 4 hours. So it could have been worse. What about yourself, mate?
Yeah, similar feelings, frustration from Saturday. Supposed to be having a concert tonight, and just as when you thought all the COVID kind of issues and that had disappeared and everything, the lead singer of the band that I was going to go see has lost their voice. So that's absolutely tremendous to have just rub salt in the wounds for a while more. But thankfully rescheduled, and yeah, I get the highlight of my day now is doing this podcast, I guess. So happy days.
I mean, it could be worse then. It could be worse.
As always, you can find this episode as well as all of our other episodes on your preferred podcast streaming sites. Just search for Talk Livi, so follow us or subscribe to ensure you don't miss another episode.
We'll start the episode off by discussing our 1-1 draw at home to St Mirren as the Buddies snatched a point.
We'll then discuss some former players who have represented both the Lions and our next opponents, Dundee.
Finally, we'll discuss the game itself as the Lions make the trip to Dens Park to take on Dundee.
The Lions welcomed managerless St Mirren to West Lothian in front of a bumper home crowd. Despite controlling the game for large spells, the Lions had to settle for a point in the end. Euan, we've already said it's frustrating. What are your thoughts on the game?
Yeah, I think you saw what happened in the build-up to the game with Jim Goodwin. Me and Callum kind of touched on it last week, that he was being linked with the Aberdeen job and he has decided to go up to Pittodrie and take that job on. And it gave the game maybe a slightly different dynamic. You didn't really know what to expect from St Mirren. They have been in very, very good form. As we mentioned last week, it was 7 games unbeaten, 6 wins in amongst that. So we were expecting a tough game, but you never know what's going to happen when a manager leaves. Is it going to galvanise them? Are they going to kind of down tools a little bit? You don't know what's going to happen. But I think the first half, it was 2 very evenly matched teams, I would say. But I think if either of the teams created the better opportunities, I would definitely say it was ourselves. Bruce Anderson had one from a Nicky Devlin cutback. He's kind of skewed wide. Ios had a header which has hit the roof of the net as well. Jason Holt had an effort from the edge of the box. Well, there was an incident right on half time which sent the home end into fury would be the best way to describe it, with a head knock on the halfway line, and Nicky Devlin's eventually been played through 1v1 on goal, and Willie Collins pulled the game back. I have to say, I think there's a bit of me that feels for Willie Collins there, because if it's a head knock, he is meant to stop the game. My only criticism of him is he probably should have just stopped the game quicker. But I think to kind of comment on the referee's performance in general, I think he did try to let the game flow as much as possible. Don't know if you noticed that he would leave a few seconds after a challenge to see if there was an advantage to be played, and then he would pull it back if if there wasn't. And I think Colin was almost trying to do that, but he was caught in two minds. It's a head knock. He should stop the game. So it's a difficult one. I think the referee can't really win in that situation. But, going into the second half, I think we really upped our game. Second half, I think we were bang at it. I think we moved the ball really well without testing Anrika an awful lot. But big controversial incident, which was a Charles Dunn challenge in front of the home dugout on Bruce Anderson. It was just a forearm smash, wasn't
it? Yeah, so obviously we're going to get onto the other one, but I do think it's surprising that we've not seen any kind of replays of this one, because I think if you ask most people, they would say that this one was the more, blatant of the two. The way that Bruce Anderson just completely bounced off of him and it did seem to be like a much more kind of forward notion by Dunn. And I think that goes back to your point there you were just saying about, Willie Collum with the head knock. So he did it with, the boy, I think, was it Grieve, who was up front for them?
Yeah.
Who, eventually decided to go down. I mean, at first he sat down, and then when he seen they were on the attack, he decided to lay back a wee bit, and then that's when they got the game stopped. But for the Bruce Anderson one, Willie Collum, clearly sees it happens to his head, but lets the game go on for a wee bit more, and it's like, well, where is the balance here? But yeah, going on to the later one, I do think that, there may be an element in Collum's head that, oh no, I've perhaps, let him away with one, and now this one, which isn't a red card, I'm going to have to, try and act upon. It's kind of hard to comment on it because, we've not really seen that second kind of replay. The first time genuinely happened, it did suggest that, Dunn had, extended an arm towards Anderson. Again, though, it's hard to, properly define that when we haven't seen like a replay on it, and I don't think anybody's really picked up on it on, like the sports scene or anything like that, unless I'm mistaken.
Well, it was definitely on sports scene on Saturday evening, but because of where I sit in the stadium, I was directly in line with the incident, and it's as blatant a red card as you'll see all season, in my opinion. Dunn he's extended his forearm. I mean, I know we don't do video, I'm away impersonating it on the camera, but he's just gone and extended his arm out and smashed Anderson in the face with his forearm. It's a blatant red card. It's a blatant red card. And, we'll obviously come on to touch on the one where he did eventually see red. But again, going back to our kind of actual performance, I think we were moving the ball really well. I liked how Davy switched Newbley and Forrest round in the second half. Forrest went out onto what you would probably say is he prefers playing out on the left-hand side, Newbley coming out to the right-hand side for a change. But I think it actually gave Nicky Devlin a bit more licence getting forward. I think they linked up really well, and Newbley had a chance where he sliced one wide. Anderson eventually got the goal, and it's that, as I was mentioning, that link-up play between Newbley and Devlin. Great little through ball down the channel, Nicky ball across, and obviously Bruce intended to play a 1-2 with the post. It's definitely Bruce's goal as well. I think that was covered on Sports Scene. It does hit Shaughnessy's back and then hits Anderson and goes in. So Bruce,
instinctive.
Exactly. It's a striker's finish every day of the week. But I'll definitely give Bruce the goal. But there was another one we're talking about. It's a lot of kind of elbows, let's say. There was one where Newbley got booked for a challenge on Richard Tate, which I think, actually seeing the replays of it again, if you're being consistent, Newbley's a wee bit lucky to stay on the park, actually. Personal opinion. But then came the ultimate sucker punch with Greg Kilty's equaliser, which has been an Achilles heel for us for a couple of seasons, is defending set plays. And, I mean, there's a catalogue of errors in it. Penrice loses the man at the back post for the initial knockdown. And then Alan Forrest, it reminds me a bit of Jacko's clearance in the game against Aberdeen at the start of the season. He's just completely sclaffed it, and it's landed to the player at the edge of the box, which is Kilty, and then it's so happens to have taken a deflection off Alan as well and gone in. But we then have the actual red card incident for Charles Dunn on Sebastian Soto. We'll come on to touch about his debut as well. But I think, again, from the position I'm in, I'm directly in line with it. And I thought it was a red card at the time. Because, again, I think Dunn's made a motion towards Soto as he's approaching him. And albeit I think Sebastian might have played for it a little bit, going by his comments to Bruni in his post-match, which he was like, he saw him making the motion and just went, I'll take the hit. But again, it was that motion that makes me go, well, there's intent there. And for me, I thought it was a red card. I think the angles on Sports Scene for that one didn't quite do it justice, in my opinion. But for me, that was a red card. And we almost did get the late winner with a potentially bizarre own goal from Richard Tate. I think he's volleyed it off his head and then it's almost rifled into the net and Anwick's tipped it past the post. But for me, it's very kind of reminiscent of the Ross County game in a way. I think we've done enough to win the game. We've created enough openings and opportunities in the game, been 1-0 up, and we've just not got over the line. And those 4 points would see us sitting fourth currently. And I would probably say you're not worrying about anything behind you at that point either in terms of the playoff spots or relegation. So I think it's a big opportunity missed again for us, unfortunately. But there are positives to take from it. I think there was a good performance in there.
Yeah, completely agree with you. It's just incredibly frustrating as you say that there. We're sitting in ninth now and we so easily could be, fourth. And what comes with that as well is, how much more of a boost the team gets from that, how much more of a boost the fans get from that, how much, the kind of momentum builds up from there as well. In the kind of case that we're in where we've kind of dropped some points here, it could be in danger of doing the opposite. You're playing that well and, you've not picked up the points that you deserve. Does it have an adverse effect on the mentality of the side? Possibly so. However, I do think that the guys are very, very resilient and they've came back from much more this season instead. So very confident they'll kind of keep up the performances because it's just a wee couple of wee bit of tweaks in that. I think from the game against St Mirren, I don't think we tested Alnwick enough. I think that's maybe something that's possibly softened the blow a bit for me. See if we came out of the game and, we'd been absolutely firing chances against them like the whole time and all of that. I don't necessarily think that we actually did create an awful lot that probably merited us to take the whole 3 points, despite having, the larger share of the ball. I mean, you always see that in football. People say, oh, they had more possession. Did we do enough with it? I'm not entirely sure, especially when you've got, as good a goalkeeper as Jack Annick in goals. You've got to really be testing them and making most of those kind of efforts and that. Plenty to be encouraged by. I do think that team that we played is our best starting 11 that we could possibly do so. That'll be, only the second time that they have played together as a starting 11 as well. So there will be, time for them to gel in that furthermore as well. The likes of Newbley still getting used to the league and that, you can see what the team's trying to do in most of the instances and that. So yeah, I think there's definitely a lot to be, encouraged by, for the rest of the season. And, this weekend's game against Dundee is, the perfect time to try and put that right essentially. But yeah, obviously kind of touched on Sebastian Soto and, his impact on the game. What did you make of the American international, which is something that's we don't really get to see quite an awful lot for Livi? What do you think of his debut for the club?
I mean, he's an absolute dreamboat. Is the first thing I'll say. I mean, he has literally been taken out of a Disney fairy tale as Prince Charming. He's arguably the most gorgeous player we've ever had. And I think I speak for the vast majority of our fan base that the guy should be doing modelling, to be honest. He should have a calendar. Honestly, he looks incredible. But to actually speak about his footballing ability, I think the guy, he looked very energetic, looked very keen to get proper stuck in about it. There was a couple of little touches, little flicks round the corner. But I liked how when he did attempt one of his flicks round the corner, he was straight on the move again, to get on the ball again. Again, he was quite willing to take the hit there for the team with that Charles Dunn incident. So I think there was enough there to see that he could make an impact for the team. Obviously, he's going to, again, it might take a couple of games and a few more minutes for him to settle in, as is the case with the vast majority of players coming into the Scottish Premiership. But I think there was enough there to be encouraged by. The boys, obviously, as I say, very keen to impress. He's been talking in the press this week about it's an opportunity for him to maybe play his way into a World Cup squad later this year for the USA. He's got a couple of caps for them already. So you're hoping that incentive, we can get the best out of him between now and the end of the season. But I like the look of him, both in his footballing ability and the boy was he's just a handsome bugger, let's be honest.
I think it's obviously, the talks of a certain hour loanee, that effort, I guess, you can kind of see straight away is the easiest way to win fans over. And yeah, it's always just encouraging when a player, makes his debut and the thing they want to do is just get on the ball every time, just showing at every opportunity. I think he was in danger of, maybe losing a bit of the support when a couple of the fancy flicks and that were coming out. First one worked an absolute delight. And then there was one that he ran out of the park that was quite the opposite of what he intended. But, again, if you're that kind of player, though, you will try that kind of thing. And, you'll be eager to impress on your debut. And the more he kind of plays, more gets up to match sharpness, maybe the more those kind of things are going to work. And, a wee bit more of a flair player will kind of come out. But, yeah, certainly impressed by, the kind of brief cameo. So now a good option to have up front as well. Now we've got Anderson, Newbley and Soto who can, play up front. I think it puts us in a very healthy position, especially if any of them are, lacking fitness or whatnot. So, yeah, very, very happy with, the kind of first impression of it. But, yeah, kind of reminds me he looks a wee bit like Ian Harkes.
Yeah, he's an American as well. It's obviously just an American thing.
So, I don't know, every time I look at him now, I'm like, is that Ian Harkes? But thankfully not to be. Ian Harkes isn't that bad a player. I don't know why I'm coming for him. Sorry, mate.
But another performance which was quite impressive, and we mentioned him earlier on in the piece, was Joel Newbley. He did come off having got that yellow card, which maybe an amber card we'll describe it as. But what did you think of Joel's performance overall?
I thought he did well. There's something with Willie Collum, what he does as well, that kind of annoyed me regarding Joel Newbley. Willie Collum seems to be one of those referees who likes to referee based on player size. Every time in that first half that the ball went up to Newbley, Marcus Fraser would put two arms on one of Newbley's arms and basically pull his arm back. Willie Collum would give nothing, essentially. And it's like, what? Are you only giving that because, Newbley's, towering him in size and that? You don't think that he should be, a big guy like that should be able to be, enforcing that? Like, Marcus Fraser's not a small guy in the slightest either, but it's just like, in all honesty, every time that the ball went to Newbley, you could easily have blown up for a free kick because Fraser was literally yanking his arm off of him. But in terms of, his actual ball play, I think, there was glimpses, the goal that, he likes to, get the ball at his feet, create those kind of opportunities and openings. He's not an overly selfish player either, which, you kind of seen, how willing he was to, let him definitely get in the overlap. There was a couple of times where, he was just lacking that wee final bit of quality. He was running the ball out of the park or whatnot. But again, I think that's still just, kind of getting used to the league and, realising how much time you do and you don't have, and it'll come over in time. What I do like about him as well is that he was also not afraid to, get the ball at his feet and put a cross in. I feel like with like Forrest and that, it's always, taking them on and, running across the face of the goal, trying to create a goal opportunity. There was one instance where, he got the ball out of the wing, just had to be look up and, just fired a decent cross in. Something that we've not really seen an awful lot since, Josh Mullins left. Probably not ideal that, he's the one who's, 6'3", 6'2" or whatever, and he's the one putting it in for, the 5'6", 7 players in the box. But nonetheless, cracking ball in and, it gives us another outlet. Yeah, just his intelligence on the ball and, his awareness in that, I would say, was probably very encouraging. And yeah, hopefully as the more appearances go, the more he settles into the team and, we'll get more goals and assists from him.
Yeah, I was really impressed with him, I have to say. I think what Joel does really well is he suckers players into him. He drags 2 or 3 bodies out to him and it just creates openings automatically. Players are losing runners or losing their man that they're marking. And he slows the game down. He seems to play it at a very, leisurely pace, the game, and he makes it look quite simple at times. And he rarely kicks the ball further than about 10 yards. I don't know if you noticed this, but he'll sucker players in and it's just like a wee 5-yard ball or 10-yard ball round the corner. For example, it was Penrice in the first half he was linking up with quite a lot, and then Nicky in the second half. But the amount of times it worked, playing that little ball inside and you had a free man running into a bit of space was quite frightening. But I think that's the benefit, as you say, he's clearly a team player, isn't he? He does that work for the team and that link up to help and benefit the team. And I think he's going to win a lot of the fans over very, very quickly. Not that he hadn't already, where he's formed before he'd even kicked the ball for Livingston. So I think we've got an exciting player on our hands for the rest of the season and going into next season as well. But yeah, it's a disappointing result in the grand scheme of things, but there are a lot of positives to look at from the game as well. But hopefully we can get back to winning ways on our trip up to Dens Park next weekend.
Just one final thing I wanted to add, actually. What highlighted the game for me was, the ball going into the St Mirren dugout and Jamie Langfield attempting to catch it, and he didn't. And got a fair few pelters for that as well. Just wanted to add that as a.
The thing is, it's not a good thing when you were a goalkeeper and your nickname's Clangers. It just doesn't scream confidence, does it? But it's good to see Jamie is keeping up the persona of Clangers, even now he's retired and he's now a goalkeeping coach. So that is quite entertaining to see. But just on another point, actually, Angus, before we do move on, how good was it to see the stadium a bit fuller, 3 sides of the ground just about filled up as well? How good is that to see?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's always been a thing that, we've been, since we've been up in the top flight in that people have, kind of lambasted the television cameras like position, and that certainly doesn't help. But yeah, it's absolutely class to, to see, people in seats essentially. It makes a big difference. Even at like the end of the game, you can hear like the unusual voices, the youthful voices just shouting Livy, to try and spur the team on rather than just being like the lads who are in C3. It did seem as if, the kind of local community did take to it, and, hopefully it won't be the last time that they're there. Thankfully as well, I don't think we did our usual bad performance when we do this kind of thing. Hopefully, many of those people will have liked what they have seen, and we'll come back for another one. I'm not quite sure where our next home game is. Is it
Dundee United? Dundee United midweek is our next home game. Maybe
we could do something again. I don't know. I guess it's just worth trialing for the rest of the season, seeing how this would maybe go. But yeah, absolutely tremendous. It does make a massive difference. I think the players, can clearly appreciate it as well.
It's just great to see that buzz about the stadium on a match day. Normally we get that for the games against the Old Firm, but it's all away supporters, essentially, when there's that buzz around the stadium, and we don't really want them there. But it was great to see, as you say, young kids coming out, watching the team. And the thing I always talk about is, I think I mentioned it last week, this is the most successful period in the club's history, prior to when we initially got up into the top flight, qualified for Europe, winning the League Cup. This is the most successful spell in the club's history out with that. And the team deserve to have more folk coming to watch them. Don't get me wrong, there comes a point where you need to entice these people into becoming a paying customer, buying a season ticket. But we've talked about it before, our season ticket value for kids is unbelievable. So, that small expense might not be a small expense for all families, I understand that, but it might, these couple of little flashes they get to go into the games, that excitement, it might just entice them to come back in the future, and you've got another generation of fans coming through. And it would be great to see, as I say, a few more bums on seats on a more regular basis, because I've got to say I love seeing the ground a bit fuller, because it's a great atmosphere you get in at the Tony Macaroni Arena when it is a bit fuller as well. It's a great wee stadium when it's packed. So hopefully that's the first of a few more fans coming to watch the team in future. For a little change, we thought we'd discuss some ex-players this week, but with the theme that they had to have played for our next opponents as well, which in this case is Dundee. Angus, which players are you wanting to have a little blast from the past and a little discussion about?
I think one that's quite an easy one to start off with is somebody who was in the news quite recently, obviously unfortunately losing his job as Dundee manager, James McPake. I think James McPake is quite an interesting one. Not only, a former Livingston captain, he was also at the club at that time with Angelo Massoni, and he was probably sold for a wee bit of a cut price as well. I think if you've seen the Open Goal podcast that he did with Si Ferry, then there's a lot of interesting stuff there that would be very insightful for a lot of Livingston fans to to see about that kind of time at the club. But obviously he would have been, like a Livi youth player at quite a exciting time for the club in that as well. So you would have been in the maybe on the fringes of the team, when the likes of your bigger profile names, that cup winning side was there. But yeah, and you've also got the interesting, distinctive thing where, would he have really been learning off of most of them because he was a striker when he started off, and made that interesting move from, being a forward, ended up being a centre half, and, quite a fairly solid one at that. And I think whenever we talk about kind of like Livi youth products, he's one who kind of goes under the radar a wee bit. But when you compare, where he ended up going to, comparing where the club ended up kind of necessarily going to, you've got to say that he had a fairly decent career, basically, after leaving us. Obviously going down to Coventry, having a decent spell down there. Hibs, he was at.
You mentioned James McPake. I remember him coming in, breaking into the team as a striker under Richard Gough. When he came in, I actually remember him scoring a winner against Dundee, bottom of the table class just after
Even
Gough
more
got the
decent
job.
to bring him up then, right?
So I'm sure it was Dundee. It was either Dundee or Dunfermline, but I don't think he was ever really going to make the grade as a striker, and that's no disrespect to him, but it's quite funny. I actually remember one of the first games seeing him in the flesh play centre-half. And I think he'd been playing in the reserves. I believe Archie Knox was the one that was trying to convert him into a centre-half, and he played for the reserves as a centre-back. But it was a pre-season friendly at Livi against Norwich. And it was the season we got relegated to the first division at the time. And I remember hearing the team get read out, and it was number 4, James McPake. And, my dad, we were literally having this discussion, me and my dad, at the weekend, and I was like, McPake's playing centre-half. And my dad's going, McPake's not playing centre-half, he's a striker, right? And then it was like 20 minutes into the game, my dad's like, James McPake's playing centre-half. I was like, I told you that. Like, he's number 4, he's not going to be playing up top. But it was probably the best thing that happened in his career, that switch from being a striker to playing at centre-back, because he was excellent for us over the seasons. And, unfortunately, that Missoni period, he happened to be one of the assets that we had, and as you say, probably got sold on for, I think it was maybe like 50 grand or something, which the club probably has never seen. It's probably Angel Missoni's offshore accounts or something like that, I don't know, but it was an unfortunate way for it to end for James McPake. But yeah, you're right, he probably is one of those youth products that goes under the radar a little bit, but he has gone on to have a decent career, and obviously, unfortunately, lost his job earlier this week at Dundee, but a lot of time for him, and he was an excellent player whilst he was at Livingston.
I've just looked it up, and I don't know where I for some reason I've got this image of James McPake playing for like either like Ross County or something like that. Never ever did. He only ever played for Hibs, Livi and Dundee and Scotland. I don't know where I've got like this idea. I don't know. For some reason I just thought he played for a Highland team, but I think the thing with McPake as well that he's probably going to be most remembered by was that he was the best of a bad bunch when he was in that Hibs team that got beat, 5-1 in the cup final. He obviously scored in that. I don't think he was actually ever really that bad for Hibs, in all honesty, but he had, so much dross around him that, it kind of dragged him down a bit. The season that they got relegated him as well, I'm sure that he was injured for a large portion of it. So who knows, is like a club captain, a big figure of the team, would he have made a difference in that? Possibly so. Obviously, he had that appearance for Northern Ireland as well that, probably didn't go too smoothly.
Yeah, it's a very strong Northern Irish accent, this James McPake.
Yeah, I think it's a player who's, I think his career was hampered a lot by injuries and that as well. He went into coaching. I'm pretty sure he'll be back into it as well in no time. He'll probably end up at some, championship side or that. And yeah, hopefully, kind of gets back onto it. Good player, good Livi youth product, and yeah, all the best to him in the coming years, I guess.
Another player I thought we should touch on is currently at Dundee as well, is Danny Mullen. Now, Danny Mullen's a funny one with Livi fans. I think there's a lot of Livi fans that seem to give Danny a really, really bad rep, but the lad played 176 games for Livi, like, and scored 42 goals, a goal every 3-4 games. Why does he get such a bad rep from some of our fans? I don't really get it. And again, it's another one who came through our youth setup as well, Danny.
I think with Mullen, it's always that kind of interesting one. I don't think you could ever fault his effort. I mean, I think I always have kind of vivid memories of Danny playing for us, and you know, at times where, you know, a long ball's been played or that, and, you know, he would certainly contest it against, you know, players much bigger than his stature is. I think it may just be that kind of usual kind of frustrating thing when you've got a player who's a wee bit more of a kind of a flair player at times and that, and and if they lose out in that, I think our supporters are very, very quick to jump onto, you know, somebody being what they would probably say wasteful with the ball. I guess, you know, you said that, 42 goals in 176 games, you know, it's actually not that bad a record. You know, he must be one of the club's top goal scorers of all time with a record like that as well. Maybe people are a wee bit too harsh on him. You know, we maybe have to ask out to the people, you know, what was the issues with him. Probably I'll end up scoring this weekend now, and that'll give us more of a reason, you know, to dislike him and that. But I would be lying if I said that I was always, you know, kind of entirely keen on him as well. I don't know if it just at kind of the same times there was players who, you know, maybe prefer to have played there instead. Far from a bad player for us. You know, I think you were saying just before we did this as well, you know, the kind of like the honours and that he has at the club. You know, obviously we sold him halfway through that championship winning season. Can't really fault his efforts in that or in the League One season prior to that, playing a part in the Premier Sports Cup or whatever, or the Petroflat Cup it would have been back then. Very, very peculiar one, Danny Mullen is.
I think Danny's the type of player you'd rather have in your team. I think he's an absolute workhorse of a centre forward. I think the season where that really showed, I think, was the League One season, where I think Bucky ended up getting Player of the Year for the division. And I don't think Bucky would have got near that had it not been for all the efforts of Danny Mullen. It's a bit of that Lee Miller, Ryan Hardy partnership a little bit. I think Danny did all the graft, took all the hits, took all the knocks, and Bucky was way rolling it in the back of the net and taking all the glory at the end of it. And I'm pretty sure I've heard Bucky say that Danny was his legs, essentially. He did all his running for him. So I think, you know, that season was a particularly good campaign for Danny. And you mentioned that he's a Challenge Cup winner at the club, played a part. I remember him scoring a couple of crucial goals against Falkirk in a midweek game in that Great Escape campaign under Mark Burchill. As I say, won the Challenge Cup that year as a League One winner and played a very big part in our playoff season, because I'm not going to lie, when we lost Danny to St Mirren halfway through that season, I was really concerned because I thought, I don't think we've got another genuine centre forward there that's going to play week on week. And luckily the recruitment side of things from Hoppy and Davey, they brought in Miller and Hardy, and the rest is history. But you know, I think Danny deserves a lot more credit for what he did at Livingston over the years. And you know, there's been points over the last handful of seasons where I thought he could probably still do a job for us. You know, I think he's the type of centre forward that would suit us a little bit, because I think his hold up play and everything like that was always really good. He used to hit the ground quite easily, you could say. He used to buy fouls, but for me, when he's doing it for your team, that genuinely doesn't bother me. When someone's doing it against you, when he's doing it for Dundee at the weekend, they're probably going to be furious with him. But, you know, when as I say, he's one of those players that you'd rather have in your side than playing against you, because he just comes across as an absolute pest. But I think he's one that gets a bit of a hard rep from some Livy fans. Feel free to comment and explain your feelings too towards Danny. But I also think we shouldn't give Danny too much disrespect at games, because he strikes me as the type that wants to ram that down your throat and probably score against you. So yeah, I think he deserves a bit more credit for his time at Livingston.
Yeah, absolutely. And especially if I'm just coming off the back of scoring at Celtic Park, let's not give him any reason to give him any more momentum, essentially. I guess I'll go for the next one. And, again, I think it's another player who, kind of goes under the radar when you talk about maybe like greatest teams and that, just for based on performance-wise and that. I don't think he was part of like necessarily the greatest teams, but, I don't think you could ever fault any of the performances that he ever made. And that's Dave Mackay. Playing it right back, I think what stands out most for me, was his kind of goal record. I know he was on penalties quite a bit, but back in kind of like 2007, 2000, like through to like 2009 and that, he was quite prominent in getting forward and making things happen in the final third and that. Obviously he played for Dundee. I think he was at Dundee actually the season that we won the CIS Cup. Obviously he's back there now as part of the backroom staff as well. But again, I thought he was an absolute tremendous servant, and again, there seems to be a recurring theme here with the ones that I'm picking. Another player who was sold for a cut price, alongside Murray Davidson for about £2 and a couple of Iron Brew bottles.
The buy one get one free deal that still haunts me to this day. Still haunts me.
A player who would obviously, go on to, have his biggest impact probably at St Johnstone, winning the Scottish Cup there. But yeah, I thought Dave Mackay was an absolutely tremendous player for us. That season that, Dorrans and Snodgrass really made it like their kind of own in the starting 11. Keegan Jacobson and breaking through. I think Dave Mackay, a part of that side, was very, very crucial. I think we finished like 7th or 6th that season. So it wasn't necessarily great, but I don't think it was any fault to Mackay's himself. And it was no surprise that he would end up going on to have a great career back in the top flight. Upon leaving us, but yeah, Dave Mackay. It'll be good to see him again. A player, obviously we've had a good number of players now who. Making a great starting 11 of all time is a wee bit difficult, and he's probably somebody who loses out just because of that, unfortunately, because of the competition now. But yeah, somebody who's definitely left a impact at the club, I would say.
Yeah, Dave Mackay, I'd arguably say the most steady fullback I think we've ever had. Certainly in my memory, he would rarely be below a kind of 7 or 8 out of 10. Dave Mackay, yeah. He was exceptionally steady, and I think that's the best compliment you can give about him, is you really had to comment on him because he had just done his job. And I think I remember, unfortunately, he was involved in the team that got relegated from the Premiership at Livingston, but I do remember him scoring a goal the season contender in a blockbuster game. Unfortunately, we were on the end of the wrong result. We lost 3-2 to Hearts, and it was the Hearts team that had the likes of Skatchel, Jankowskis, all the Lithuanian boys and stuff like that. A brilliant volley from the corner of the box, I remember. But the following season, when we went down, he actually played the vast majority of the season out of position. He played at left back, and I'm pretty sure he scored 4 goals back to back in the first 4 league games of the season, that campaign. I remember him scoring a looping header on day against Queen of the South, but I'm pretty sure that was a record at some point at the club, and he was playing out of position at left back. I mean, frightening. But you talked about his goal record. His best season was his second last season at the club. He was 07-08, 41 appearances and 10 goals.
Yeah,
unbelievable for a fullback. Unbelievable. Yeah. I know he took penalties and stuff like that, but he was exceptionally steady. There's one moment I do remember, unfortunately, where he wasn't so steady, was a Scottish Cup tie away at Firhill. It was a replay, and we went to penalties. We battered Partick Thistle 1 each. And unfortunately went to penalties, and we had a penalty to win the shootout, and up rose Dave Mackay, and you're thinking, oh, well, it's Dave Mackay. He's just going to roll this away. And I just about caught the ball at the back of the stand. And we were like, oh, dear God, if Dave Mackay's missing a penalty, Christ, it's just not our night. And unfortunately, we went out in that game. But yeah, I think, as you say, it's probably one of the most famous transfers in Livingston history is that Dave Mackay, Murray Davidson deal to St Johnstone is utterly baffling. And brutal. Look at what St Johnstone have got out of that. Murray Davidson's obviously still there. I think, had it not been for injuries, he'd probably be a record appearance holder at St Johnstone, and Dave Mackay was a Scottish Cup winning captain there as well. So they certainly served St Johnstone very well. But Dave Mackay, I think I had him in, when Bruni asked me to do the bit for the programme, I think I had Dave Mackay as my right back in my team, because he was just so consistently steady. Nothing bad really to say about Dave Mackay. He was just, as I say, that such a consistent fullback.
Quite a short period of time there, not a part of like many of the great teams or anything like that, but somebody who very much. You
say a short time, 155 games he played for Livi, Dave Mackay.
Was that over about 4 seasons or that, I guess?
Yeah, 4 seasons. He had a season in the Premiership and then 3 seasons in what is now the Championship. So he was at the club for a good chunk of time. I think it's out with, just looking at his career, out with kind of St Johnstone, I think it's the most appearances he's made at any club. So, he had a very good spell at the football club, Dave Mackay, in terms of personal level. Maybe not so on the rewards, and what was happening off the part of the club was a bit of a mess at times when he was there. But, as I say, very, very good player. And, he's obviously gone into coaching now. He's assistant at Dundee, still involved there. When he went into management, still in Albion, he was someone that I thought, further down the line might be a Livingston manager at one point or be involved in our backroom team, but that remains to be seen what he does further down the line.
I think we'd be doing this kind of bit of disservice as well if we didn't talk about, probably the fans' favourite player to have played for Livingston in both Dundee and, I guess unfortunately plays for Dundee right now as well. A lot of fans would probably want him still at the club just a moment. But obviously, Sean Byrne holds a very dear place in the hearts of many Livingston fans. Sean Byrne, great, talk about great servants, talk about steady players and that, who always gave, consistent performances. Sean Byrne is absolutely that as well. Not looking forward to being up against them, in all honesty, on Saturday, because you know what kind of a nuisance he can be. But yeah, Sean Byrne, what an absolute tremendous player he was for us as well. Obviously, his everlasting legacy is going to be, the impact in that championship season, especially that game against Dundee United, where, it just sums up his abilities to a T, that never say die attitude and that, winning the ball back for the team, that selflessness, to do the best thing for the team that's possible and that. And then obviously you go into that Premiership season as well, where, he scored that winning goal against Hibs. He scored basically almost a carbon copy of the goal against Hearts in that 5-0 as well. So many great moments with him. What's your thoughts on Sean Byrne, Euan?
Loved them because Sean Byrne was typical of what football fans just look for, and it's somebody that just tries their damnedest when they're on the pitch. It's why fans love the likes of Scott Pittman as well. It's because they might have an off day, but it's never ever through a lack of effort or anything like that. Fine well that they've gone out in the park with every intention of trying their hardest. And I remember being at Player of the Year, and Liam Kelly was telling me some of the stats for the ground that they covered in a game away at Airdrie. We won 4-0 in League One. And obviously Liam Kelly was on loan from Rangers, but he said that, Pitts and Sean Byrne had covered something like close to 2.5K more than any player in the Old Firm game that same weekend in the middle of the park. And you're just kind of like, what the hell fuels them? Like, I'm pretty sure they must run off petrol. There's no other way that they could manage to do that sort of stuff. But is there a more iconic tackle in Livingston history than that tackle up at Tannadice on Stuart Murdoch to win the ball for Pitt's winner? I genuinely can't think of a tackle that comes to mind.
Jason Talbot.
Maybe for the wrong reasons, that one. And, having spoke to Jason, it's obviously not something he likes to talk about too much. I still maintain Jason won the ball. Slow it down. Jason plays the ball first. But, to kind of go on to Sean Byrne again, he was, again, part of arguably one of the most successful and enjoyable periods I've ever experienced as a Livingston fan, which was those back-to-back promotions. And I remember the emotion that he showed when we won at Firhill as well. Obviously, he had a very difficult period where I think he lost one of his parents. I can't remember if it was his mum or dad, but I think off the pitch, he's a very, very likeable guy as well, very down to earth. But you talk about a couple of those moments. I remember his goal against Hibs, and I always remember that Hibs game in the first season back up because I felt like that was us announcing that we'd arrived in the top flight. We went and taken a big scalp at that point. Neil Lennon's Hibs, who had finished, third or fourth the season before, and Sean Byrne must have sent the entire Hibs team for a hot dog in the build-up to that goal. He might as well trademark that chop. That it used to. It's frightening the amount of folk he used to send running the opposite direction from him. He was brilliant at it. But it was obviously a bit disappointing how it ended for Sean at Livy. I remember him getting a red card. I think it was a game against Dundee, thoroughly enough. Mm-hmm. And Steve Lawson broke into the side for kind of the remainder of the season. And, that was the end for it for Sean. And he obviously moved on to Dundee. And I think over time, Dundee fans have really taken to him as well. He played a massive part in the promotion last year. But yeah, Sean will forever be a fan's favourite at Livingston. But as I say, I think a lot of it is down to just how he went about and conducted himself on the pitch. And I think, fans always love a player like that. And yeah, Sean will forever be a legend at the football club. Yeah,
I think everything you've said there is the perfect thing way to describe him as, you've seen that kind of never say die attitude on the pitch and that. And then obviously just what he was off the pitch and that as well is definitely what will, transcend him into being, what was a solid player, what was a good player for Livy to, being somebody who's, always welcome at the club whenever because you could see like how much it meant to him and that every time that he played for us. It is a shame that, you know, the time wasn't spent longer with us. Do you think there was an admittance that it was something with his agent that actually did try and kind of force through a move a wee bit more? But anytime you obviously go over to Livingston, you know, want to see the best for him, obviously not result wise, but yeah, again, another player who, you know, many will always hold him dear in their hearts forever because of, you know, all those kind of attitudes and that the exemplaries of, you know, what you want from a player. But yeah, all the best to Sean, but not for this Saturday, right?
Yeah, unfortunately, Sean, we're not hoping you the best for the weekend. Obviously, hope you come through the game unscathed and stuff, but hopefully with no points to show for your efforts. But get in touch with us. We'll put up a little bit during the week and get in touch with us with any players that you can think of that have that connection, playing for both Livi and Dundee. And it's a segment we'll come back to at later points in the season as well. But there's certainly a few, I would say, legends at the football club that have happened to have represented both the football clubs. But as I say, get in touch and let us know your thoughts as well. Finally, this week, we look ahead to our next game as Livi make the trip to the City of Discovery to take on Dundee. Angus, how are you feeling going into this one?
I'm confident. I think with our performances, we should be confident with the way that we've been playing. The fact that we're playing away from home as well should add a wee bit more confidence because that seems to be where we're doing the most damage. Hopefully it's a lot better game than the 0-0 that happened earlier this season after we'd predicted it to be, you know, an absolute barn burner. Who knows if we'll make the same mistake by predicting good results or that, and then we'll absolutely screw us over again. It's a strange one because, you know, Dundee, you know, obviously they're sitting at the bottom of the league right now. I don't think their results too have been absolutely terrible recently. I mean, I think that they ended like a pretty bad run of like 10 games or something like that by winning 2. And then obviously they lost 3-2 to Celtic yesterday with a very hearty performance. I think a lot could be said though about, you know, set pieces for them as well, which will be a worry for us considering, you know, how we've been plagued by that a fair few times this season and last season as well. So we've got to be on the lookout for that. But I think if we, you know, if we take the game to them, we perform like we have in most kind of weeks, just a wee bit more opportunities. I don't think that their defence is that strong that, you know, we won't get chances that we didn't get, you know, against like St Mirren just at the weekend there. But yeah, I do feel confident for this one. You know, obviously they've just got a new manager who knows like how much time they have to like fully implement new kind of styles or whatever like that. But I think that we should definitely be going into this and thinking, you know, 3 points is a very big possibility.
Yeah, you touched on it there, the managerial change. And I know we mentioned it at the start with a previous segment about James McPake moving on. What's your take on the Mark McGee appointment? Because it's definitely got tongues wagging, this one, with the fact he's got a 6-match touchline ban and he's got 13 games in charge between now and the end of the season. There's a lot of folk, obviously there's connections between Mark McGee and Gordon Strachan going back to their playing days, and they worked together in the Scotland job, so there's a lot of folks saying it's an old mates act and things like that. What's your take on it?
It does seem a very left field one, to be honest, because it's like, I'm not going to lie, I don't think I've seen Mark McGee's name other than that video of him, you know, swearing at Aberdeen, essentially. Whenever it's job,
pure cinch, isn't it?
Absolutely.
It's Dundee's commitment to the cinch, and I, for one, love it.
As if Dundee haven't committed enough to the cinch, you know, with the signings and that they've made like this season and last. But whenever like jobs and that have came up in the last couple of years, he's never been a name that's really kind of popped up in that. And then just for him to not only be, you know, in the running for something, you know, for it to be, you know, done, sealed and delivered so quickly, it was just quite a big shock, because it was just like, where essentially has that came from? But you're absolutely right that it does seem to be, you know, a lot of people are saying, oh, that's the Strachan effect that's kind of landed him in that position. At the same time, though, put up a very good performance against Celtic yesterday, so maybe it could end up being the right one. But yeah, it's a very big risk when you've got 13 games to, you know, to save a team, and, you know, your manager's going to be sitting at the side for, you know, for half of them. Who knows if that'll come back to haunt them or not. But yeah, Mark McGee, I don't think anybody, when McPake got sacked, anybody would have called that happening.
Yeah, I think the timing of it as well, the fact that McPake had just won a couple of games back to back, making progress in the Scottish Cup to the quarterfinals as well. So yeah, it's a bit of a strange appointment. I did enjoy his press conference where he said he knew everything about the squad and everything like that, and then got asked about the captaincy and said he didn't know who the captain was. So, again, commitment to the cinch. You've got to commend them on that. But they're looking for that new manager bounce between now and the end of the season. They do find themselves bottom of the league. And when you look at the statistics, that there is a reason for that. They've got the second leakiest defence in the league, out with Ross County. I think there's only a goal in it between the two of them. Third lowest scorers in the league, behind St Johnstone and Dundee United, albeit we've only scored, I think, 3 more goals than Dundee have this season. But, those stats don't lend themselves to a team that's going to get themselves out of trouble. It's almost that perfect recipe for relegation, isn't it? That don't score a lot, concede a lot. And they'll need to change that between now and the end of the season. But as you say, I watched the highlights of the game at Celtic Park. Both goals coming from set plays, so that's something we're going to need to be wary of. I think Niall McGinn's gone in, and I think he has made a bit of an impact since joining from Aberdeen. He's added a little bit more creativity and quality in the final third for them as well. So it'll be interesting to see what we come up against at the weekend at Dens Park. But we are playing well. This is I say this every week. We're in decent form. We are playing quite well just now. I think we are creating opportunities, but I do think we need to be a little bit more ruthless. If you look at our last couple of league games, in particular Ross County and St Mirren, where we have had openings or opportunities, we need to be really clinical and take advantage of them. Given that we've sacrificed almost those 4 points in those 2 games, I think this game we really do need to go and take all 3, because I think it would finally maybe put to bed, looking behind us. I think we're still in a precarious position. Dundee have a game midweek against St Mirren, which is obviously a big one for them. If they win that and then beat us, they're kind of gradually dragging us maybe back into that mix again. So we need to be wary of that. And I think the best way to deal with that is by taking 3 points off them at Dens. But it'll be an interesting game. But any changes to the side that you would maybe anticipate? Anything you'd like to see?
I wouldn't say there's anything, that I would necessarily change. I think the only kind of doubt will probably be, is Obalai going to be fit? He obviously came off injured against St Mirren there. I would be happy to see boys go in if that's the case. But other than that, I can't really say that there's anything that I would swap over at the moment. Yeah, the way that the team's been playing, I would like to see that starting 11, maybe build up a wee bit more cohesion and stuff like that to take us into the final run of the season. Perhaps, the subs that came on, I would probably do so again, Braylon, Shinnie and Soto off the bench if we're looking for more goals or whatever like that. But yeah, to start off with, I would be very, very happy to see the exact same starting 11, fitness permitting. What about yourself? Yeah,
I don't think there's a great deal you need to change in the game. I'd maybe be more inclined to get Alan Forrest on the left-hand side to start with and Newbley on the right-hand side, because I really liked what I saw between him and Nicky Devlin. I think we got a bit of last season's Nicky Devlin, that fullback who's bombing forward, creating overlaps, getting to the byline. And, that's one of Nicky's best strengths. And I think it's been a tactical thing this season where he has been a little bit more reserved in terms of his forward running. So I really like seeing that quality come back into Nicky's game. And I think Joel allowed for that as well. So I'd like to see that combination link up again on the right-hand side in particular. But let's get on to predictions, Angus. You mentioned, last time, I think we both predicted 3-2s, and we ended up, certainly I was up there and watched one of the worst games of football I've seen this season. So what are you predicting for this one?
I'm going to go for 2-1 Livy. I think just the one goal between us. I'm not going to go for the emphatic 3-2 this time. I think 2-1's, a fair result to go with. Confident we can get the win, and hopefully it'll be a more entertaining game than that last one.
I'm going to copy. I'm going 2-1 as well, and I fancy wee Brucey to run riot again and get himself into double figures for his league campaign. And I think he would be the first Livingston player since Derek Lilly to reach double figures in the league in the top flight. So that would be some achievement for him. But hopefully we do come away with 3 points from Dens Park, which should help on our push towards the top 6 this season.
That's it for this week's episode of Talk Livi. Thanks again to every single one of you for tuning in week and week out. If you can, we'd love to hear your feedback, so either leave us a review on iTunes or simply message us on Twitter, Facebook or Instagram.
As Angus said, we're on Facebook, Twitter and Instagram. Search Talk Livi to find us, and you'll find all the links to our weekly episodes on there as well. You can also find our episodes, including this one, on all good podcast streaming sites, including iTunes and Spotify. And we're also on YouTube, so don't forget to subscribe to the channel. If none of those options suit you, though, all you have to do is head to our website, talklivipodcast.libsyn.com, where you'll find every single episode we've done over the last few years.
That's it for this week. Thanks to all our listeners for tuning in. Let's hope for another great week following Lothian's finest football team. Go on, Livi!
Oh, you've done that again? That's cute.
Again.
That's cute. Done that wee one again. I like it.
Livingston, oh Livingston, the Armorville Lions roar. Livingston, oh Livingston, we realize our vision. Livingston, oh Livingston, into the Premier Division. Livingston, Livingston, Livingston.